They never taught you about these engines. You won't find them in commercials, and nobody puts them on posters. But buried deep in garages, war zones, racetracks, and even failed dreams are 13 machines so wild, so ahead of their time, they were forgotten or erased. Some were too fragile to survive, others were too powerful to ignore. And one of them, it nearly broke the laws of physics just to win a race. Buckle up, because it only gets weirder from here. Honda RC116. In the middle of the decade of the 1960s, the Honda RC116 burst onto the world stage not with a roar, but with a piercing high-pitched scream that defied logic. This was not a big, brutish engine. It was a delicate 50 cubic centimeter twin-cylinder 4-stroke that revved to over 20,000 revolutions per minute. That was unheard of. Even today, very few engines, regardless of size, operate at such insane speeds. But Honda did it, and they did it in an era when digital design, modern metallurgy, and computer simulation did not even exist. The RC116 was part of Honda's campaign to dominate the smallest Grand Prix motorcycle racing classes. With a displacement barely larger than a shot glass, the engine produced 9 horsepower, roughly 1 horsepower for every 5.5 cubic centimeters. That made it one of the most power-dense naturally aspirated engines of all time. And to keep the engine on the narrow knife edge of that power band, Honda equipped it with a gearbox containing 14 gears. 14, that is more than double the number of gears found in most modern motorcycles. Shifting was constant, miss one, and the power vanished. To say this engine was difficult to ride is an understatement. It demanded total concentration, perfect timing, and a willingness to ride right on the edge of mechanical failure. But in the hands of the right rider, it won races and hearts. The RC116 helped Honda claim the world championship in the year 1966. Shortly afterward, rules changed, and engines like this were quietly buried by regulation. It may have been small, but it rewrote the rules of what an engine could be. Now get ready for a battlefield monster built from 5 engines, fused into one mechanical beast with zero forgiveness. Chrysler A57 multibank. World War II was a conflict fought not only with weapons, but with engines, massive roaring machines that turned the tide of battle. And when the United States needed to rapidly increase production of M4 Sherman tanks, Chrysler answered the call with one of the most bizarre solutions in the history of mechanical engineering. The Chrysler A57 multibank was not a single engine, it was 5 engines, specifically 5 inline 6 gasoline power plants, arranged in a circle and linked together around a central crankcase, forming one grotesque mechanical hydra of synchronized combustion. Altogether, the 30 cylinders delivered over 470 horsepower, but that number barely hints at the chaos within. Each engine had its own ignition system, its own carburetor, and its own mechanical personality. Keeping all 5 running in perfect harmony required more than just technical skill. It demanded patience, intuition, and nerves of steel. Synchronizing 5 independent engines to produce a single unified power output in the middle of a combat zone? Madness. And yet, incredibly, it worked. More than 7,000 Sherman tanks were powered by this setup during the war. Though bulky, heavy, and nearly impossible to service under fire, the A57 proved reliable, so long as every engine kept cooperating. Mechanics joked that it required divine intervention rather than wrenches, but it got the job done. Tanks rolled, enemies retreated, and the Allied war machine advanced. It may have been a compromise born of desperation, but it was a brilliantly deranged one. Today, it remains a monument to wartime innovation under pressure, where necessity did not just birth invention, but unleashed full-blown mechanical insanity. What happens when a diesel engine breathes through its own rockers? You are about to find out. Commer TS3. To most drivers, the Commer trucks of the 1950s and 60s looked plain and ordinary, but tucked beneath the cab was a diesel engine so unusual, so unapologetically weird, it bordered on science fiction. The Commer TS3 was a 3-cylinder, 6-piston, horizontally opposed 2-stroke diesel engine that used a single crankshaft mounted above the cylinders, powered not directly by the pistons, but through a system of long rocker levers. Yes, rocker levers. In essence, the pistons pushed up up, and those pushes were transferred upward into rotation through an arm that bent back down into the crankshaft above. This layout had never been seen before and has never been replicated since. With 2 pistons per cylinder moving toward each other, there was no need for a cylinder head or valves. Intake and exhaust were handled through ports located in the middle of the cylinders, opening as the pistons moved apart. The result was a compact engine with a low profile, ideal for trucks that needed a flat front and a spacious cargo area. The TS3 produced around 105 horsepower from 3.2 liters of displacement. That might sound modest, but the real story was in the experience. The sound was an eerie metallic howl, more akin to a swarm of mechanized bees than a diesel engine. It vibrated in weird, unpredictable ways. It idled like it was angry, and it could keep running even when conventional engines would fail. The Commer TS3 earned a cult following, especially among fleet operators who appreciated its compact size and rugged design, but over time, its complexity and cost of maintenance caught up. By the late 1960s, it was gone. Another wild experiment filed under almost genius. We don't just list engines, we hunt them down, dig through archives, and revive the ones the world forgot. If you're still with us, hit subscribe. This kind of research deserves it, right? Honda RC 211V. In the early years of the 21st century, Honda introduced a racing motorcycle that would not just win races, it would redefine the sport. The Honda RC 211V was developed for the brand new Moto Grand Prix regulations, which had replaced the older 2-stroke formula with a new 4-stroke championship. But while other manufacturers played it safe with conventional V4 or inline 4 layouts, Honda broke tradition and introduced something radical: a 5-cylinder V configuration engine with 2 cylinders in the front bank and 3 in the rear. The RC211V's engine displaced exactly 990 cubic centimeters, the maximum allowed under the new Moto Grand Prix rules. But the brilliance lay in the asymmetrical cylinder arrangement. It created smoother torque delivery, more manageable power, and fewer vibrations. This gave riders superior traction and stability during acceleration and cornering. The result was a motorcycle that did not just go fast, it delivered every ounce of power with clinical precision. This 5-cylinder masterpiece produced over 240 horsepower and revved comfortably beyond 14,000 revolutions per minute. The sound it made was something between a Formula 1 car and a fighter jet, yet the engine behaved like 2 motorcycles in one. At low revolutions, it felt like a balanced V-twin. At high speed, it roared like a turbocharged inline 4. Between the year 2002 and the year 2006, the RC211V crushed its competition. Riders like Valentino Rossi and Sete Gibernau took full advantage of the bike's perfect balance of aggression and control. It became one of the most dominant machines in Moto Grand Prix history. Now we go from 5 cylinders to 2 strokes wrapped in full water jackets. Suzuki GT750. In the year 1971, Suzuki took the motorcycle world by surprise with the release of the GT750. This bike was like nothing else on the road. While its competitors were hesitant to move away from air cooling, Suzuki pushed forward with a bold decision to mass-produce a liquid-cooled 2-stroke 3-cylinder motorcycle. It was the first of its kind, and it earned a nickname that would become legend, the Water Buffalo. But until that moment, water cooling was seen as too complex, too expensive, and completely unnecessary for motorcycles. But Suzuki saw an opportunity to solve the biggest challenge of 2-stroke power plants: heat. By wrapping the engine in water jackets and mounting a proper radiator at the front, they achieved something few had thought possible: high performance, consistent temperature control, and long-term reliability in a brutally powerful 2-stroke platform. The GT750 featured an inline 3 engine that displaced 738 cubic centimeters and produced roughly 67 horsepower. At a time when most motorcycles struggled to balance power with reliability, Suzuki achieved both by managing engine heat through a large radiator and water-cooled cylinder jackets. The result was an engine that delivered raw, ferocious torque while staying cool and consistent even under prolonged strain. It could hit highway speeds effortlessly while still intimidating stoplight rivals with explosive throttle response. Its sound was unforgettable. It rumbled and growled at idle, then erupted into a banshee-like shriek once the revs climbed. The unique 3-4 exhaust configuration added to the madness, while triple carburetors, one for each cylinder, ensured sharp throttle response. The bike also came equipped with front disc brakes, an electric start, and a surprisingly plush ride for long-distance touring. Though heavy by two-stroke standards, the GT750 was versatile. It could tackle long road trips without hesitation, and then explode into action at the twist of a wrist. From smoky to silky, we are heading into the golden era of whisper-quiet American straight eights. Buick Inline 8. Long before the rise of the V8 engine in American cars, there was another configuration that symbolized power, luxury, and refinement, the Inline 8. And when it came to building smooth, long-running straight-eight engines, no company did it better than Buick. From the early 1930s until the late 1950s, the Buick Inline 8 was the heart of the brand's most luxurious cruisers. These engines came in various displacements, ranging from 233 to 320 cubic inches, and typically produced between 100 and 150 horsepower. However, it was not about raw numbers. It was about delivering an incredibly smooth and quiet driving experience. The Inline 8's long crankshaft and balanced firing order gave it unmatched serenity even at idle. Mounted in large, heavy sedans like the Buick Roadmaster and Buick Super, the engine whispered rather than shouted. It delivered torque gently, making shifts smoother and acceleration feel like a glide across pavement. In an age before power steering and automatic transmissions were common, this engine made driving feel almost effortless. It was the silent giant of the pre-war and post-war American road. Owners cherished the quiet authority of the Buick Inline 8. Whether chauffeuring executives through urban boulevards or cruising across country roads, the engine always felt composed. Mechanics admired its simplicity and reliability. Enthusiasts loved its old-world charm. But by the late 1950s, changing manufacturing priorities and tighter engine bays led automakers to favor the more compact and lighter V8 configuration. And so, the era of the Inline 8 ended, but its legacy remains, an era when luxury was measured in inches, smoothness, and the hum of mechanical grace. Let us rewind a bit farther, to an engine so strange it was erased from the car world. Saab V4. In the quirky world of Scandinavian engineering, Saab always danced to the beat of its own two-stroke drum, but by the late 1960s, even Saab had to admit that the world was moving on. Emissions regulations were tightening, two-stroke engines were losing favor, so Saab did what no one expected. They borrowed a four-stroke engine from Ford, specifically the Ford Cologne V4, and they stuffed it sideways into the nose of the oddly shaped Saab 96. It was a union that made very little sense on paper and somehow worked beautifully in practice. The Ford Cologne V4 was never meant for a front-wheel drive, rally-bred snow monster. It was developed in West Germany, designed for compact rear-wheel drive sedans and vans. It had a 90-degree bank angle, which meant it vibrated like an unbalanced washing machine. It sounded like a chainsaw dipped in gravel, and it produced only about 65 horsepower in most configurations. But Saab did not care. They knew how to make weird things work. Despite the engine's rough character and unrefined behavior, Saab tuned the 96 to rally perfection. With front-wheel drive, a short wheelbase, and absurd weight distribution, it clawed through snow and ice like it was born there. Because it was. Saab drivers like Eric Carlson famously dominated events like the Monte Carlo Rally behind the wheel of this awkward machine, earning worldwide respect for the little Swedish brand. Mechanics cursed the engine's cramped bay, drivers loved its torque-rich feel, and the rally world took note when this underpowered oddity began taking podiums away from giants. It was noisy, it was crude, but it was nearly unstoppable on frozen Scandinavian gravel. But wait, what if I told you we once had a motorcycle engine with no valves, no camshafts, and more steam than sense? Cyclone Mark V engine. Imagine building a motorcycle engine in the 21st century with no pistons, no camshafts, no crankshaft, and no internal combustion. Sounds like madness, right? That is exactly what Cyclone Power Technologies aimed for with the Mark V engine, a 6-cylinder radial steam engine introduced in the early 2000s as an experimental attempt to resurrect steam propulsion for the modern age. This was not just a throwback, it was a reinvention. The Cyclone Mark V engine used a radial layout with 6 water-jacketed cylinders arranged like spokes on a wheel. Instead of pistons moving up and down in combustion chambers, the engine relied on steam pressure to push the pistons outward in a rotating cycle. There were no spark plugs, no fuel injectors. Instead, it ran on superheated water vapor generated in an external combustion chamber. The exhaust was, get this, distilled water. In theory, it was nearly zero emissions. In practice, chaotic genius. boost. What made it even wilder was its simplicity. The Mark V combined the steam generator, lubrication system, condenser, and engine all into one compact unit. This meant fewer moving parts than even a conventional two-stroke engine. But fewer does not mean easier. Managing heat, pressure, and lubrication in real time required space-age materials and constant monitoring. It was part steam engine, part science fair project, and part powertrain revolution. Cyclone envisioned the Mark V powering motorcycles, small cars, and even military drones. It ran, it moved, it even made appearances in prototype vehicles. But ultimately, the challenges of funding, efficiency, and manufacturing caught up. And if that is too abstract, how about a 16-liter diesel that can snap your neck at idle? Scania DC16. When it comes to heavy-duty diesel engines, few names carry the same brutal reputation as Scania. The Scania DC16 engine is not just big, it is seismic. This 16-liter V8 diesel power plant was engineered in Sweden to move Earth, carry nations, and remind physics who is in charge. It is not for commuters, it is not for fun. It is for hauling 80 tons of steel through a mountain pass without blinking. At its peak configuration, the DC16 produces over 770 horsepower and nearly 2,500 pound-feet of torque. Let those numbers sink in. That is more than 10 times the torque of most modern pickup trucks. That is enough to pull a loaded freight trailer uphill while towing a second one behind it. And it does all of this while maintaining mechanical reliability under constant stress. The magic lies in the details. Twin turbochargers provide massive low-end boost. A robust cooling system manages thermal loads, and electronically controlled fuel injection systems ensure precise delivery of diesel even at extreme altitudes. But what drivers talk about most is the sound. When the DC16 fires up, it does not growl. It rumbles like tectonic plates shifting beneath your feet. You do not operate this engine, you respect it. Found in Scania's flagship R-Series trucks and other heavy haulers, the DC16 is built to endure over 1 million miles of commercial service. It is a workhorse, a monster, and a mechanical statement. Now let's talk about the return of an engine so radical, the world gave up on it too soon. Mazda Skyactive X. It is a gasoline-powered internal combustion engine that thinks like a diesel and acts like something altogether different. Called the Mazda Skyactive X, it is one of the most ambitious efforts in modern combustion engineering. While the rest of the world rushed toward electrification, Mazda decided to push the limits of what gasoline engines could do. At the heart of the Skyactive X is a technology called spark-controlled compression ignition, a system that allows the engine to seamlessly alternate between spark ignition and compression ignition depending on conditions. When the timing and pressure are perfect, the fuel-air mixture ignites without a spark, much like in a diesel engine. When that perfect moment cannot be achieved, a spark plug steps in to take control. This juggling act happens hundreds of times per second and requires incredibly precise control of temperature, pressure, and fuel injection. The result is remarkable, a gasoline engine with diesel-like efficiency and surprisingly robust performance. Displacing 1,998 cubic centimeters, this inline 4 produces approximately 177 horsepower and over 165 pound-feet of torque. But what makes it mad is not the power, it is the complexity. The engine runs at a compression ratio of 16.3 to 1, far higher than most gasoline engines can handle. Mazda's engineers developed custom pistons, ultra-fast sensors, and millisecond-level spark timing to make it all work. The Skyactiv X feels like two engines at once. At low revolutions per minute, it pulls like a diesel. At high speeds, it sings like a naturally aspirated four-cylinder. It is a mechanical balancing act performed in real time under the hood of a commuter car. Now let us look at a V12 so powerful it was nearly banned from the sky. RollsRoyce Griffin. If the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine won the war, then the Rolls-Royce Griffin rewrote what piston-powered flight could become. Designed in the final years of the Second World War and refined in the years that followed, the Griffin was a liquid-cooled V12 aircraft engine with a displacement of 60 liters. It was physically larger, significantly more powerful, and notably more aggressive than the legendary Merlin that had powered Spitfires and Lancasters to victory. The Griffin produced well over 2,400 horsepower, depending on configuration, and featured a dual-stage, dual-speed supercharger system that allowed for sustained high-power output at altitude. This gave pilots of late-model Supermarine Spitfires an enormous advantage, both in climb rate and top-end speed. The engine's reverse-rotating propeller shaft also helped neutralize torque steer, making the aircraft more controllable in tight maneuvers. But the Griffin was not just a military weapon, it was a masterpiece of British engineering. The sound it made was guttural, thunderous, and completely unmistakable. Aviation enthusiasts described the noise as apocalyptic, a deep, rumbling growl that shook the ground during flyovers. Its sheer presence made it a favorite in post-war air shows and a darling of restoration teams across Europe and North America. Although the rise of jet engines eventually pushed piston aircraft into retirement, the Griffin represented the final glorious apex of internal combustion aviation. It was not efficient, it was not quiet. It was, however, breathtakingly powerful and outrageously complex. And just when you think V12s are wild, try this next 12-cylinder from the racetrack that roared before it broke itself apart. BRM Type 15 V16. In the wild, early days of Formula 1 racing, engineers were limited only by imagination, and the British Racing Motors Type 15 proved exactly how far that imagination could go. Built in the early 1950s, this race car was powered by a supercharged 1.5-liter V16 engine. Yes, 16 cylinders arranged in a V, all crammed into a body designed to chase perfection on a track filled with chaos and surrounded by danger at every corner, where speed was limited only by courage and mechanical nerve. The engine produced just under 600 horsepower and revved to over 12,000 revolutions per minute, numbers unheard of at the time. But what truly set it apart was the sound. It did not growl, it did not rumble, it screamed, a piercing metallic howl that echoed off grandstands and stunned spectators into silence, or covered their ears in agony. The BRM V16 was musical, mechanical madness. But it was also cursed. The complexity of the engine, combined with the fragile nature of its components, meant it spent more time overheating or breaking down than winning races. Mechanics struggled to keep it tuned, drivers feared its power delivery, and engineers were constantly firefighting issues from detonation to lubrication failures, often resorting to last-minute rebuilds just to get it on the starting grid. Despite its inconsistency, the Type 15 remains one of the most iconic cars in motorsport history. It was the loudest, boldest, and most dangerous kind of innovation, a machine too advanced for its time, too ambitious for its materials, and too brutal for the racetrack it was born to conquer. It never achieved the dominance its creators hoped for, but it left a mark on the racing world that no silence could ever erase. And last but not least, NSU Row 80 Wankel Rotary. In the year 1967, NSU Motor & Werke AG launched a car that looked, sounded, and drove like nothing else on the road. It was called the Row 80, and under its smooth aerodynamic bodywork was a radical innovation that would change the course of automotive history. A twin-rotor Wankel rotary engine. Unlike traditional piston engines, the Wankel design used a pair of triangular rotors spinning inside an oval-shaped housing, converting combustion into rotation with fewer moving parts, less vibration, and a higher power-to-weight ratio. The Row 80 was the first mass-produced passenger car to use a rotary engine. Its drivetrain was mated to a semi-automatic transmission with an electric clutch and vacuum-operated gear selector. On paper, this car was a revelation. It produced 115 horsepower from just under 1 liter of displacement. It could cruise effortlessly at high speeds and offered an exceptionally smooth driving experience with minimal engine vibration. It was in every sense futuristic. It also won awards. The Row 80 was named Car of the Year in Europe in the year 1968. Reviewers praised its ride quality, cutting-edge styling, and revolutionary engineering. It looked like a concept car that had somehow escaped the future and landed in West Germany, but then reality hit. The Wankel rotary engine had a fatal flaw: durability. The apex seals responsible for sealing the combustion chambers wore out far too quickly. Many engines failed before reaching 50,000 miles. NSU, a relatively small manufacturer, was swamped by warranty claims. Repairs were expensive and customer confidence collapsed. By the early 1970s, NSU was absorbed into Auto Union, which later became Audi. The Row 80 vanished, but the rotary dream lived on through Mazda. If you made it this far, you're clearly one of us, someone who sees engines not just as machines, but as stories forged in metal, fuel, and madness. So what was the wildest engine you saw today? Drop your favorite down in the comments. We read every one. And if you're hungry for more forgotten brilliance, mechanical chaos, and the genius that history tried to bury, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell.